Hey,
Welcome to Chowder and Grits, the podcast for Virginia Tech and ACC sports. I'm Justin Cochiola alongside Tim Hirth. It is Friday, December 3rd, and man, what a fun time to be in Hokies, man. We're talking about the new Virginia Tech head football coach, Brent Pry. We're going to break down his hire, talk about his press conference, and everything that kind of goes along with that. Exciting times to be a Hokie, so it seems. We're also going to talk about the Commonwealth Cup and having it for the 17th out of 18 years in Blacksburg, and the whooping that J.C. Price put on her, or at least maybe not a whooping, but the victory.
that was a whooping.
Maybe the whooping in the post game on the field afterwards. We're going to talk about all that. Bronco Mendenhall surprise resignation. We'll chat about that briefly. Take a quick look at the ACC championship game between Pitt and Wake Forest. But before all that, Tim, what's going on?
Life's a whirlwind, man. We just got back from my daughter's Christmas pageant, which was awesome. She sang and did some hand dancing. I don't know what you call that. Interpretive dance with your hands, the children way of dancing. I don't know, but she did some of that. Yeah, a lot of this. There were some handbells.
I'm great at it.
She's too young for the handbells, but I mean, let me tell you, they're tearing those little handbells up. Handbells.
Yeah, I love the handbells. Reminds me of like mass, Catholic mass.
But low key, this was the first performance I've seen any of my offspring in. And there's a lot of nerves that shoot through your body when your daughter's about to get up there and do something, because you're just like, please. Well, the honor of our family is on the line here. Just
the benefit you have of that is I'm sure you've gotten like a lot of behind the scenes practice action.
Oh yeah.
So you knew exactly how it was going to go.
I was so proud. She, there's a big thing about nerves, and, they got up there and saying, they said, please, we're hopeful that all the children aren't too nervous or whatever. And, when my wife spoke to Audrey, she asked if she was.
Were nervous. They on stage when they made that announcement? Because
yeah, they were.
What better way to bring on the nerves?
That was my first thought was, well, they didn't have nerves before. Thanks. But she went over to Audrey and she said, are you nervous? And she said, no, Mom, it's my time to shine. I was like, that's my girl. That's my girl. She's a Earth. Let's go. Oh man, so that was great.
It's lights, camera, action time.
And let me tell you, she tore it up.
Wow.
So yeah, it was
That's great. Good. I can tell you, I don't think my oldest would be able to do that based off of, I don't know, just her behavior. So she gets real stage shy when a stage isn't even involved. So I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, no, that's exciting times. It's that time of year. You've got all the Christmas stuff coming up. Bracing for the holidays. We didn't get to preview the Virginia episode last week. We should call that out. And life got in the way, as it often does in a holiday week. But we both probably, I don't know. I had Virginia Tech winning the game. I had a 39-38 prediction win, which it's fairly close.
I'm not picking UVA in that game. And there was something about J.C. Price, and it just felt like, even though it was obviously tough. I mean, Virginia's defense has been so bad this year that even in offense is stagnant as ours. And even with a play caller as inept as Cornelson, you figured we'd find our way into the end zone enough to win the game. And lo and behold, we'll
talk about that in a little bit. We're gonna start off the show with some different coaching news.
Oh wait, well, there's other coaching news?
yeah, no, there is. But yeah, we're going to talk plenty about Mr. Cornhead in a few minutes. But Brent Pry is the new head coach of Virginia Tech football. So wasn't a name that was really on the radar, I think, for most of Hokie Nation. Probably didn't know who Brent Pry was this time a week ago.
To be fair.
If you watched the Big Ten, you probably knew he was the Big Ten or the Penn State defensive coordinator, but probably didn't know much more outside of that. I mean, Whit Babcock didn't even know Brent Pry was a GA here, so he was informed of that in the process, and part of the reasons he approached him as coach. But before kind of diving in to trying to learn about Brent Pry, what was your initial reaction to the hire? You're just boom, like Brent Pry's the head coach. You see the tweet come across, news alert, whatever it was. What was the initial reaction?
So there's a scene in Step Brothers where I can't remember if Shark Week gets turned off or what triggers this scene, but he basically says, this house is like a prison on planet, BS. And that sort of tantrum was similar to my first reaction. I think I got in my head that we were going to make more of a splash higher than that. And I hadn't heard a lot about Brent Pry. I mean, I know his name floated around probably about 5 days before the announcement. Maybe it was a tweet from ESPN or someone associated with ESPN that said he was starting to hear Brent Pry's name quite a bit. And I couldn't imagine it. I couldn't fathom it at the time. So I didn't look a whole lot into him. So my first initial was, I was a little bit unhappy for the first 5 minutes, and I calmed down, took a second to look things over, read through the resume, more importantly, hopped over to the Penn State message boards. And I mean, you would have thought someone had passed away, as somber and as upset as those folks were to lose him. And I think that is the first time in recorded human history that a team's message board was sad to see a coordinator go of any kind. And to me, the things that they were saying about Brent Pry weren't just surface level. Oh, we've had a great defense. It was, oh, what a loss to our recruiting. What a loss as a human being. What an amazing guy Brent Pry is. Everything about their defense, obviously. They mentioned how many times the defense had bailed them out over the past 4 or 5 years when their offenses weren't so hot. But I looked into some of his connections. When I read a little bit more into how integral he was in Penn State's recruiting, given how badly they've worn us out in our own state, I felt like that was a pretty good thing. And by the end of about 30 minutes of research and watching a couple of YouTube videos, I'm a Pry guy. I love Brent Pry, and I can see why Witt decided to go with him for many reasons. But one, and then I'll kick it back to you, this is the biggest thing to me, is that Justin Fuente never felt like a fit. Virginia Tech seemed like a job to Justin Fuente, and there's nothing wrong with that. But this means more to Brent Pry, and you can see it, and it comes off as very genuine, especially in the press conference. This feels like a fit, not just from a personal character, personality, but a fit to the callback of the style of play that got us to where we were as a program. And I think that was genius. That was a great hire, and it took stones from Witt, because Witt probably knew hiring Brent Pry wasn't going to go over great with the Virginia Tech fan base, because a lot of us, I mean, let's be honest, we don't know a whole lot about him. And we were hearing rumors of Matt Campbell and Bill O'Brien. Thank the Lord that didn't happen. But it was Brent Pry, and that took a lot of stones. So good on you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like initial reaction is always like, especially when he came to this point, it was Monday morning we found out, or Tuesday morning, right? Mm-hmm. Where the news broke. And so nobody knew what was going to happen in the coaching world in college football. But I mean, it's absolutely exploded, Bananas. So you had a bunch of jobs open anyways. You had the LSU job open, USC, Florida, Washington, Virginia Tech, a few others, TCU. So, I mean, pretty big jobs open. And then Lincoln Riley says he's going to USC, so Oklahoma pops open. And then out of nowhere, Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame to go to LSU, which was crazy. And then, in between, you've got like Matt Campbell rumors. You've got, Bill O'Brien. Is that why Virginia Tech hasn't announced yet? Are they waiting for, a coordinator at a playoff school to finish? Like, we'd imagine it's not a head coach. So, I mean, there's all these scenarios running through your mind. And then when you finally see the name, it's like, oh, well, that guy wasn't on our list. And at this whole time, I thought it would be a guy who wasn't on the list. And I didn't know who that guy would be. And I was never expecting a Matt Campbell-ish type of hire. Right. I thought we could do it if we wanted to, or if we were able to sway a guy like that. But, I thought this entire time, the way that Witt keeps things so close to the vest, the names you were hearing, it's all speculation. People are like, "Whoa, Witt said this and Witt said that." Witt didn't give you a crumb of a clue, because that's how he operates. So I wasn't super surprised to see it come off the list. I mean, I wasn't like jumping up and down when it was named Brent Pry. I wasn't enraged. And the first thing I started doing is I had already kind of looked into him a little bit because you started hearing his name Sunday night into Monday. And I mean, the big thing that really stood out to me, the tie to Virginia Tech is interesting as a graduate assistant. I like that tie into Beamer and Foster. I thought that was definitely very interesting. But I mean, the dude puts together some pretty rock solid defenses.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing that kind of stood out to me, where it felt like the hire was trying to go back to the core of what Virginia Tech football was built on, which was defense, more kind of a physical brand of football, more, we don't know what the offense is going to look like, but back in the day, it was strong rushing offense, control the clock, play really good defense, win football games. And I mean, now that we've seen him speak, we've seen others come out in support of him. I mean, like you said, overwhelming support.
I agree. Support's a good thing.
Battling a cough here. Overwhelming support from the Penn State community, from James Franklin, from former players, from NFL players, guys like Micah Parsons, for anybody who's paying attention to the NFL, first round pick, probably going to win defensive rookie of the year in the NFL.
Yep.
Had very not like angry things to say, like, I can't believe he's leaving, blah blah blah, but like wishing him the best, essentially. And I think it's interesting because it's similar to how you would expect a fan base to react if like a Brent Venables were to leave Clemson, or if Bud Foster ever took a head coaching job. And it feels a lot like his relationship with James Franklin was a lot like Bud Foster's relationship with Frank Beamer, to where he had it good, right?
Yeah.
Like if you look at Penn State over the last 8 years, but you can look at the last 5 years, they've had 5 different offensive coordinators. They haven't been great on the offensive side of the ball. James Franklin's an offensive guy, whatever that reason is. But you look at the defense, and the defense hasn't ranked outside of the top 40 in his entire tenure there as far as yards allowed. And so they could always rely on that defense, or that defense was always keeping them in games. And it was really about the offense that's kind of held Penn State back over the last few years. But he had such a good situation there. He could be picky when it came to the job. And there was job openings that he could have taken a couple years ago, back when you look at the Louisiana job in 2018, which is where Billy Napier was.
Georgia Southern, I think, offered him.
Georgia Southern, where he used to coach.
Mm-hmm.
But just something about it wasn't pulling him to it. And the quote that I liked, I don't have it written down here, I don't think, but he mentioned, like, I didn't want to be the head coach at UVA, which you know the way to our hearts.
Yeah, playing to the crowd, baby.
He mentioned somebody else in like Northwestern, but he's like, you asked me if I wanted to be the head coach of Virginia Tech. It's like, yeah, that's somewhere I'd want to be the football coach at, or the head coach. And hearing him in the press conference today, and how like choked up he was getting about Frank Beamer and Bud Foster, and details came out about how he got on as a GA, and how he was knocking down Billy Heights' door, just 50, 100 calls, whatever it was, and went to high school in Lexington, wanted to play football at Virginia Tech, wasn't good enough, went elsewhere, played football, got hurt, ends up going to coach with his dad for 2 years. That's where he meets James Franklin. And then full circle, he's looking for the GA job, and his dad had coached Brian Steinspring in high school. And that's how he knows Brian Steinspring. And so there's a relationship there. So really interesting to kind of learn about that. And it's, to me, going full circle back to the initial reaction, like, that's why you can't judge a book by its cover, right? Because on the cover of that book, Brent Pry doesn't look like there's any kind of emotional connection to Virginia Tech, or it's like, okay, he's had good success at Penn State. He's jumped around. He's had good experience. Oh, he had a little GA opportunity, but it was more than just a GA opportunity, right?
Right.
Like he went to high school in, I'm not going to say the Blacksburg area, but Lexington. He had that familiarity with the program. He was obviously like very influenced by Beamer and Foster. And so the more you kind of hear about it, the more you hear him talk, the greater you should feel about what the program means to him, what this place means to him. And I think the other thing is too, that you shouldn't overlook, he was here from 95 to 97, 98 or something. That's when Virginia Tech was rising. I mean, he was here for that 95 season. That 95 season is when Virginia Tech got put on the map.
Right.
Right. They had good seasons in 93 and 94, but 95 is when they beat Miami.
Right.
They go to the Sugar Bowl. They beat Texas.
They didn't beat Miami. They whipped Miami's tail.
Right. And so it just is what it is. So I think that's interesting to see, kind of like he was here when it got going. Now we're in this kind of a rut, and he kind of knows what it takes. And he talked about that from a recruiting standpoint, from the pride that, guys that went to high school in Virginia that they have at this program, and why Beamer wanted to focus on Virginia and having their parents close and being drivable, because it's, it's tough when you're making that transition. So it just felt like he was the guy that really gets it. I feel super good about his recruiting prowess and his background and the guys that he's recruited himself, but also just kind of knowing how it's done. I mean, you can kind of say what you want about James Franklin, whether you like him or not, but he's a great recruiter. And so kind of bringing that demeanor to Virginia Tech is something that's been lacking. And I mean, it was lacking in the Fuente era, but you could probably say it was lacking a little bit towards the end of the Beamer era, to where it was the staff that got complacent, got older. They probably just weren't grinding like they used to, or like they should have been. Not that there wasn't talent at the end of the Beamer era, but I think there's certain things that you miss out on when you get complacent, like it appears that they did. So, I mean, we should be stoked about the hire. Great background. Like this year alone, Penn State was ranked 7th nationally in scoring defense, 11th in yards per play. He's been the standalone primary DC for 6 years. First 2 years, he was the co-defensive coordinator. He was part of a Vanderbilt program that won got to 3 straight bowl games, which at Vanderbilt is almost impossible to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things to be excited about. Really, the only box he didn't check was the head coaching box. And, it's good to have head coaching experience, but again, it's like, you don't get that experience unless you get it. And he had been at a Power 5 level, or a Power 5 school now for, I don't know, better part of 11, 12 years, if you date back to the SEC and the Penn State. So it's like, I mean, those are big time conferences, big time schools. So there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be set up for success.
Yeah. And another thing you hit on, which I think is important, another one of those boxes, I think actual head coaching experience may be a bit overrated. I mean, we've seen so many good coordinators come into these head coaching roles and absolutely kill it. And we've seen so many head coaches come up from the G5 level to the P5 level, or P5 to P5, making similarly lateral moves and falling flat on their face. So I'm not sure how much of an indicator being a coordinator is and translating over to a head coach. My biggest thing in the search was I wanted somebody with experience at a big boy Power 5 football school, not necessarily someone who had been experienced at the G5 level, but hadn't seen how it's done at the higher levels of the P5, which is more important to me. I'd rather have a coordinator experienced at that level than take a head coach who's killing it at G5, who's got little to no big time Power 5 experience. Because, and that's just not a Fuente thing, although obviously recency bias, one of Fuente's biggest issues to me is that he was not familiar with how to run a program at the Power 5 level, at the middle to upper levels of the Power 5 level. And I think that was one of those things where, Fuente was the sexy hire at the time, but you go back and see all these mistakes he made, and they were just so elementary, like sticking with Brad Cornelson in the face of everything that told you should let go, the lack of an emphasis on recruiting, the not understanding how to build a system to recruit effectively, the lack of, regional ties to the area, I thought was a big deal. And we're crossing off so many of these boxes that I felt really let Fuente down with a hire that I think reinforces everything almost that we complained about, down to the most superficial level, which is, this is the right personality for Virginia Tech at this time. We couldn't do another Justin Fuente, rightly or wrongly. And this is not me trashing Justin, but Justin had a personality that was very reserved, very much an introvert. And I'm just not so sure that that's a fit at Virginia Tech. But you see Brent Pry, basically a ball of energy bouncing up to the podium. He's affable. He seems very kind. He's warm. That's the kind of leader Virginia Tech needs. And you go through all of these things, checking the boxes, regional recruiter, big time Power 5 experience, seems to have the right character. If you go off what everybody else is saying, seems to have the right personality. You can see how Brent Pry can totally sell the university on the recruiting trail, because you can tell, I don't know why I don't know why I have these accent issues. But you can tell how much Virginia Tech means to him. And it's not a superficial, hey, I'm going to tell you what you want to hear at the press conference. I mean, you can hear him when he's getting emotional talking about Virginia Tech and how much this program means to him. You can tell he gets it. And more than anything, this broad, vague term of having a coach that gets it is so important and makes me feel so excited for the potential at this university. Throw away the fact that our defense should look great in the future with Brent Pry, bringing back a more aggressive style, bringing back some great linebacker play. I fully expect all those things. More importantly, everything else aside, golly day, what a great fit. And, I never would have expected that when I was digging into Brent Pry before. But as soon as I hit the YouTubes, I'm telling you, I mean, I texted you guys as soon as I got done with like a 5-minute YouTube video. I was like, all right, I'm a Pry guy now. I mean, it completely sold me when I saw that personality. And just the fact, I mean, when you hear these Penn State people talk about how integral he was in setting up the system, specifically the recruiting system at Penn State, if that doesn't fire you up, I'm not sure you have a pulse. Because if you've not been paying attention, Penn State just walks down here and takes the cream of the crop and goes back up north. And you talk about two schools that are very similar from a fan base standpoint, from a college town standpoint, from just a general vibe standpoint. Penn State, Virginia Tech, very similar programs. So this is such a good fit, man. And I am so pumped. So pumped.
He talked a little bit about recruiting in the presser today, and it was very clear that Penn State's got a much different approach to recruiting than Virginia Tech does.
Oh yeah, relationships, man.
Well, relationships. He also said that they've got a guy whose full-time job is to monitor who's coming into the portal and whether or not that they should approach said player. And if they do, they give that to the positional coaches for them to go out and basically explore it further. So, that's interesting. I think, if we talk about the coaching staff right now, which largely needs to be put together, J.C. Price is retained. He's going to be the associate head coach and defensive line coach.
Love it.
Which, was a instant win. Preson Prelu is back as director of player personnel, which I was totally fine with as well. So
of course,
those two guys have been out recruiting and trying to keep this class together. And he did hire the head coach from Savannah State, Sean Quinn. We don't know what role he's going to play on the defensive staff, but he is going to be on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And basically touch on Quinn real quick. For those that don't know, Quinn took over a absolutely hapless Savannah State football program, didn't have a weight room, had nothing in regards to facilities, a constantly losing HBCU program. I think he was making $80,000 to $90,000 a year, didn't have a contract, was basically paid just like a janitor or an admin person at Savannah State, goes down there, turns them into an absolute winner. And I think his last record there was 8-2. You may be able to correct me if I'm wrong there, but you read into Quinn and it is immediately obvious from people in the coaching circles and their opinions on that guy, what type of coach he is. And clearly with that being such a quick hire, Pry and Quinn must have a very strong relationship, because it seems like he texted him as soon as he got the job and said, basically, pack your bags. And I guess early on, it seems he'd be a natural fit as sort of a linebackers coach. But I think this guy is going to be a relatable, dynamite recruiter. Anybody that gets hired on the defensive side of the ball, you got my full faith. Do whatever you want. Pry's got full reign. I'm not going to question any coach that he think is worth his salt on that side of the ball, especially if it is at that linebacker coach position. But people should be very excited for Quinn. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, so now we're taking, an HBCU head coach and, isn't he going to be out of his league? And that's nonsense. That's nonsense.
Yeah, I think
nobody wins at
Georgia
Savannah
Southern
State.
too.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, so it's not like he's never coached.
No. If you're position coaches, you want him to coach technically sound football. You want him to understand what you're doing on that side of the ball. More importantly, you want him to be able to recruit and relate to players. And it seems like that is his strength. Now, was he recruiting a ton of 5-star players at Savannah State? No, he's not Deion Sanders. Okay. But he's got a record of recruiting well, relating well. You hear the guy talk, you can hear it in his voice, in his interviews. I'm very, very excited. I think that's a low-key, very underrated hire. And I think Hokies are going to grow to love that guy a whole lot too. But I thought that was a great, great pickup. And clearly must have been the first person on his mind, because that was immediate. And did you get any confirmation? Was Ryan Smith retained or not yet?
I think it's rumored, which I think he's probably the only guy left on the staff that has the chance of sticking on.
Yeah.
He was the GA at, I believe, Penn State.
Yep.
While Pry was there. So there is a connection there. I mean, I think Ryan Smith is well regarded in the industry as well. So he's been doing a nice job from a recruiting standpoint.
Yep.
He's got a pretty good reputation as a positional coach. So I would definitely not be surprised to see Ryan Smith retained, but I doubt there's anybody else on the staff that we would retain. There is a name that I think may come back, and that's Brian Steinsburg.
Oh, buddy, I would love.
And I mean,
I would love that.
Brian Steinsburg is like this polarizing figure in Virginia Tech football, but if you know anything about Brian Steinsburg, you know that he's like a just knockout stud, probably one of the best recruiters in college football.
The best recruiter ever at Virginia Tech. And I'm telling you, if you can get a guy that experienced with those kind of relationships in this state as your recruiting coordinator, I'm all for it. Yeah. Please do not let his perceived underperformance as an offensive coordinator sway your opinion if we do hire Brian Steinsburg. Brian Steinsburg is a great positional coach. And more importantly, for this recruiting right now, for this program, I couldn't imagine a better recruiting director to help rebuild some bridges that have been burned.
Yeah. And so could definitely see him in a role like that, or maybe even as a positional coach with the heavy emphasis
be a great
on
tight end coach.
Recruiting. Right. So I think with Steinsburg, we'll see. The other thing to mention here is we'll get to salaries in a second, but Virginia Tech's pool of money has gone up 50% to what it was supposed to be for Fuente in 22, which means they've got $5.5 million for staffing outside of what Pry's making.
Yeah.
And then they've got an additional 2.5, I believe.
That's right. For what do you call it? Staff that's not coaching, basically support staff.
Yeah, they've got an additional 2.25 for support staff. So their money pool is now number 2 in the ACC.
That's huge.
When you add up coaching salaries and support staff, second behind only Clemson. And it's only behind by, if you take Dabo's salary out of it, it's only behind by about $300,000.
Right. And so that puts us ahead of Florida State, which should resonate regardless of the product of the field
Florida
recently
State
in Tallahassee.
And Miami.
Right. So, I mean, that's huge commitment from the administrative level, which is great when you're talking about setting up a coach to succeed.
North Carolina.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Mac Brown. We'll talk about the NC State.
Get out of our state,
later.
Mac.
Yeah. You're done. Look, Brent Pry shows up wearing what he was wearing when he got off that plane. I mean, dude just oozes football guy. Like he comes out dressed like that. Every other euphemism he uses ends in tails. I mean, he's going to be unstoppable. He's going to be unstoppable. I can't wait. But yeah, Mac, we got to do something about North Carolina encroaching. And I clearly with that staff, the gauntlet has been laid down on intent and how serious we are about getting this football program back to where it needs to be. So from the top down, there's one goal. And we made a hire that completely aligns with that goal, and all of this synergy right now is just making me so excited. One, to see the staff that's going to be named, because I'm excited. We got a blank slate on offense, man. I mean, we can talk about different offenses and what you would like to see. I think we're going to be somewhat pass heavy in the RPO, like Penn State had been with Soraka and all those other offensive coordinators. I mean, they had about 6 of them in the past 4 years, I feel like. And they run the co-OC systems and the co-DC systems, and there's so many people he could pull from. But the fact that we're talking about a blank slate here, and one quote from the press conference I really like, because he was questioned on the offensive side of the ball, what style he wanted to run. He mentioned explosiveness, he mentioned efficiency, but I thought one cheeky quote that he had in there was, he wanted an offense that was hard to prepare for from the defensive side of the football, and he knows what those look like. And I have full faith in him that he absolutely does know what offenses are hard to prepare for. And if he could get us one that is at least somewhat creative and attempts to be explosive every now and then, I will be a happy man.
I wonder if he was interviewed as far as like, hey, take a look at this Virginia Tech offense and tell me if you think it's difficult to prepare for or not. That was where my head went to with that. Prize deal is 6 years, $27.5 million. Annual salary of $4 million. It's kind of a weird structure. I don't fully understand it because I think it's like a $500,000 base, and then there's the rest is what do you call it?
Incentives.
Incentive based. So
that was,
we'll see what
that
happens.
was the inverse of what I would have expected, but yeah, I thought that was a little strange.
I'm sure most of it's just like you have to get through the spring game,
right? Take a breath on the sideline. There you go. You got $25,000. I'm sure it is too. Not sure why, but that's a tolerable salary. You're not handcuffing yourself. You're not creating problems for yourself down the road. And in today's football world, with some of the salaries we've seen, I'm very happy to have a coach with this salary with this kind of budget for support staff and coaching hires. It's a good place to be.
So we'll see what happens there. I think the big thing with recruiting, we've talked about a little bit, well respected, who he's going to put in those support staff roles, who he's going to bring on campus, and basically how they're going to reshape the class. Like they're going to have scholarships come available. Unfortunately, Tavion Robinson entered the portal today, right after the press conference. So he was set to be wide receiver 1. And he is departing the program. Trey Turner announced he's leaving for the NFL draft. There's been some lower profile announcements, like a Knox Kadum. We had an offensive lineman a few weeks ago. So, there's going to be more attrition. That's just what happens in these coaching changes. But if you've paid attention, the transfer portal is on fire right now. I mean, with the amount of big name coaches that have been leaving and changing roles, like it's ripe. So Pry mentioned that he's screenshotting entries, I think is what he said. And, they're going to do their best to bring in who they think needs to fit. So I would expect a heavy emphasis on the portal going into this early signing period, and as they're trying to reshape the roster, and we'll see who else kind of leaves, or at least for the NFL. So that's all I had for the coach there, but excited about the future. I think it's going to be a big change. Looking forward to some of the other changes that he implements.
Yeah, I mean, this is as excited as I've been for Hokie football in 4 years, 3 or 4 years, quite honestly. And I guess until you experience this kind of feeling again, you forget how far you've sunk in regards to positivity and excitement, just general feeling like your football team is headed in the right direction. For the first time in 3 or 4 years, I can genuinely say without a hint of insincerity that I think Hokie football is in the right hands, and should be for the foreseeable future. And for that, we can all be thankful.
Yeah. No, you feel good about it right now, which is obviously easy to do after a new hire. But does feel Mike Youngish to me. But we just have to see it play out. So football is a different monster than basketball. It's harder to flip in a short period of time, just because there's so many more players, and it's a much more physical game, and it's about depth and execution and having those enough guys to kind of roll in and scheme and making sure you got the right guys. So, we'll see. I think patience is key. I think the thing to consider is, you've had 2 other changes in the Coastal from a head coaching standpoint, which neither of those positions are filled at this point. One of those schools is not even going to be competitive. You've got Miami down there, who seems to have a quarterback, but a lot of question marks everywhere else. And then you got a Pitt team that's loaded with seniors that is going to look very, very different next year. So the Coastal is very much up for grabs. We don't know if Sam Howell's coming back, but there's no way to say kind of what Virginia Tech's chances are at this point, because the roster is way too much in flux right now. But
true,
it's not like the ACC is going to be this formidable dragon, and we should expect just an abysmal season next year. I think there's to be determined. There's still a lot to unfold here over the next couple of months, so we'll kind of see what happens. But let's jump into the UVA recap real quick. And I mean, we all watched the game, right? So we don't have to go into tremendous details here, but a few things I want to hit on. So, like we said earlier, 17th out of 18 now for the Hokies. They did get back to bowl eligibility, which is good. Sounds like leaning towards the Pinstripe Bowl, which is cool. I don't think we've played there before.
I would love it.
It's a Yankee Stadium in New York, obviously. So I think it's a Big Ten opponent. So they're talking Purdue or maybe even Penn State, which would be interesting.
That'd be great. Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. The game itself, it was a weird game, game that had a lot of swings. I think from a defensive perspective, I was so frustrated with the first half. It was a defense that it was getting out physicaled. It seemed like a lack of effort at times, just on certain plays. Like, I'm not going to say it was just like on every play, but certain effort plays to where, maybe you could go for a tackle and you pull up. Brendan Armstrong ran over 3 of our players into the end zone. Pathetic. That was a low point for me. But it was a pretty porous defensive performance in the first half, but they came out in the second half, held UVA to 3 points. There was a Brendan Armstrong injury in there, which I think did hamper him. But that being said, they were struggling to move the ball before that happened anyways. So you got to give it to the defense there, because they played really bad in the first half. I think on the offensive side of the ball, Tim, I mean, we didn't talk about the Miami game because we missed last week's show, but it was the same problem that stopped them from coming back in the Miami game, which is where, if you think about the Miami game, Connor Blumrick comes in, he provides a spark for 2 or 3 drives, whatever it was, throws the 2 touchdown passes, which, were short passes, but was providing the spark with his legs, got the Hokies back in the game. The Hokies have a shot. And then all of a sudden, Virginia Tech's in a situation where they have to throw the football. And Connor Blumrick's still in the game. And then Connor Blumrick doesn't come out of the game. And Connor Blumrick is unable to make plays with his arm when he needs to. And it's like, why didn't they go back to Braxton Burmeister? And then you flash forward to the Virginia game, and Burmeister's having a great game. He's playing fantastic, making a lot of plays with his legs. Needs to make a throw, they'll make a throw. And they keep throwing in Blumrick in key situations, and he wasn't having the success on the ground that he was in that Miami game. And it was frustrating. But then when the game's on the line, you know, you had the Jordan Williams sack on Armstrong. Ball goes to looked like the 1 yard line. I was praying it was on the one. They called it a safety. And it's 29-24. And then UVA kicks the onside kick. And Virginia Tech recovers, so they're past the 50. There's 3 minutes, 7 seconds left in the game. You're feeling pretty good, right? You're like, okay, all Virginia Tech has to do is make them use their timeouts, run the football, hopefully get a first down and just run out this clock, win the game, 29-24. But instead, no, we want to get cute. So they put in Connor Blumrick on, I think, second down.
That's correct.
They run a fake reverse pitch, and then he pulls a Mark Sanchez butt fumble by running into his offensive lineman and fumbling. And UVA recovers with basically just under 3 minutes left in the game. And you're thinking at that point, wow, we're back to the coaches blowing the football game again for a fourth time this season.
That's right.
Virginia Tech is going to lose a game that they have no business losing because the offensive coordinator doesn't know how to manage personnel.
Yeah.
And I wanted to literally put my head through a wall.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm never a fan of rotating quarterbacks, but if you're going to do it, you need to do it in a way that's somewhat effective, like UNC with Marquise Williams and can't remember the other feller's name. That was somewhat effective. But when you talk about what we were doing, we were taking Braxton Burmeister out of the game when he would begin to find a rhythm to put Blumrick in the game and become a predictable one-dimensional offense where we weren't having success running the ball. And throughout the game, my blood pressure just kept rising as we just decided that we were going to be stubborn as jackasses and keep trotting out that same game plan. And that was the climax of all of those feelings when we had that. The fake reverse is bad enough, but obviously with Blumrick in the game, you had those frustrations with, him being trotted out so often. And you had those same feelings where, yes, coaches, offensive coordinators are going to lose us another one here. And that frustration was going to be too much to take if the subsequent events didn't happen in the manner that they did, because there was no reason that we should have been in that position. None.
No. And it was just like, I was trying to talk to my wife about the situation, which, there was nobody else to talk to. Right. And I was just taking out my core and frustration and I just cannot, he cannot be gone fast enough, because if he was literally going to be the reason that they blew the game was locked up.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm still frustrated thinking about it.
Oh, I'm mad again too.
Stupid the play call was, and I don't even blame Blumrick for it. Yeah, he shouldn't have fumbled.
No, it's not Blumrick's fault, man.
It was just a stupid play call. But it wasn't as stupid as a play call we saw by the other team.
Well, no, there was another Hokie play call that we need to shout out too that was even more stupid than that one, which was a quarterback sneak on 3rd and 3. That
wasn't even a quarterback sneak. That was I'm going to try and catch him off guard. Snap the ball. It was awful. That
was a train wreck. But no, they all pale in comparison to what the former coach of UVA decided to draw up in the dirt.
Yeah.
For the game-winning play.
So UVA gets the ball to the 11 with just under 2 minutes left. And then they go into, we need to kill the clock, which yes and no. You do, but you're also down 5 points.
You also need to score.
Right. You need to score a touchdown.
Screw the clock at that point.
And then, I mean, literally, I don't know what's worse is if it was the play call or the fact that Bronco was literally defending it, like almost to an embarrassing fashion after the game.
It was that. It was the defiance, I think, in the post game. Because what's your optimal scenario here? Like, you drew this up. Your optimal scenario is that you are getting one of the slowest players on the football field for you at the time, the ball 6 to 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage in space.
Well, yeah, like, so if you didn't see the play, it's 3rd and 9. Okay. UVA could get a timeout. They could get a first down. They could still get a first down. I think it was like 3rd and 9 on the 11.
Yeah. They
throw a lateral pass. First off, Armstrong rolls right. If he just runs, he's got a minimum 5-yard gain.
At least.
Minimum. He probably picks up a first down, maybe scores. Okay. Well, he turns around and laterals the ball, essentially. He throws it across the field behind him. So it's a lateral to his 6'7", 295-pound offensive tackle.
Almighty.
Who would have needed to run 14 yards to just get back to where it would have been a first down. So it's 3rd and 9. You then throw it 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage to your 6'7", 295-pound offensive tackle, who then gets tackled for a 5-yard loss, sets up a 4th and 13, and Virginia Tech breaks up the pass in the end zone and wins the game. And then it's not just the play call. Bronco, he had multiple quotes about the game. The one that stood out to me, and I quote, "They played it really well." And you have to be disciplined to play the play well. And they were there, and they made a nice play.
That's right, baby. Come on.
What do you have to be disciplined about, Bronco? You've got a bunch of defenders who are already on that side of the field. Well, no, they're gonna get blown by a 6'7", 295-pound offensive tackle.
That's the problem with the call, right?
I understand your defense can't tackle, and I mean Virginia Tech's tackling not so great, but it's better than yours. And he said multiple times that it works in practice. That shows you how bad your defense is if that play's working.
Here's the thing to me that just mystified. I have so many questions about the inner workings of this play, but this one I can't figure out. Why the hell did they throw a lateral? Wouldn't you try to get a little more vertical on that route? Seeing as you got an offensive lineman who can't run very effectively, wouldn't you try to get a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage? Instead, they ran a lateral like they were about to set up the old offensive tackle pass to the end zone. And to me, I'm just sitting here like there's so much wrong with this play. It had to go through so many levels of checks and balances. Your wide receiver coach had to be like, yeah, that's a good play. Your head coach obviously was like, oh boy, that's what works in practice all the time. And then your offensive line coach had to be like, boys, I think you're onto something. So many
here's what happened. It's like, oh, you know what? They ran that Philly special on us earlier. We're gonna hit them with the Wahoo Wah special, whatever you want to call it. They're not gonna see this coming.
God, train wreck of a call.
I mean, honestly, if you really want to get that play in there, if you really just want to try it out in a game,
not then.
You don't do it on 3rd and 9 with a minute left when you're down 5 on your own on the opponent's 11-yard line
with Brennan Armstrong as your quarterback.
I can't imagine the pain. I mean, UVA fans must have felt there because.
Oh man.
I mean, let's be honest. It hasn't been great sledding for Virginia Tech football here over the last few years, but we at least don't have our superior beating us 17 out of 18 times. And we've got a great chance to win the game. And our head coach draws that up.
Oh,
I don't know
gosh.
how I would have reacted.
It's poetry.
The Cornelson call that we've talked about was awful.
Oh, it was bad.
But this is in a different stratosphere.
I tweeted almost immediately from our account that I think that is the worst play call I've ever seen. And that is an accurate quote. I still stand by.
Especially
I cannot recall
situationally.
That's what I mean. The whole thing as a package, everything about it is bad. But the situation is almost mystifyingly bad. You've got a quarterback that set records, who is on that drive looking unstoppable.
Yeah, he's finally come to life in the second half.
Right. And you decide to take the ball out of his hands, because a lateral is a lateral. I mean, that's nothing. You're asking him to do nothing on that play.
It wasn't just a lateral. It was all the way across the field.
It was a hell of a lateral. I mean, it was like
a 35-yard lateral.
Yeah. I mean, it looked like the Music City
Miracle. The field's
Miracle.
53 yards long.
What was the tight end in the Music City Miracle? Threw it across the field for. I knew you would know. See, where else are you going to get that? What other podcast are you going to get that on? Why check with the freaking cannon, man? I mean, that's what it reminded me of, is a long lateral. And then you saw it go to the offensive tackle, and like you almost just laughed immediately.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And yeah, if you're a UVA fan, I mean, I joke about things like strokes and aneurysms, and I shouldn't do that. Football gets me worked up, but I think I would have had a medical emergency. I think that would have been like, you could have put that on my tombstone, that's what took me out. And everybody that went to the cemetery that day would have been like, yeah, oh, I get that. I can relate. If only my team had done that. That could be me in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that one.
God, I'll never forget that. And, you know, to top it all off, right, we'll get to it later, but that happens to be basically effectively the last offensive play. Like, that's the last taste of the Bronco Mendenhall era that UVA fans are going to have, because nobody cares about the next play. Because
it is. He's going to coach the Bull, but nobody cares.
Nobody gives a
dude,
crap.
Your last play call.
That's your legacy.
Your second to last play call.
That's your legacy.
At UVA in the regular season was that.
God almighty.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's the closest I've ever been to feeling bad for a UVA fan. To be clear,
I laugh because it's so true, because I think I probably would have had a medical emergency as well. Or I would have you seen those guys that just beat the hell out their TV screen. You're like, what's happened? I'm like, maybe that would make me do that.
Oh,
if
man.
That happened.
I mean, I don't know if spontaneous human combustion is real, but if it is, I would have lit a flame. There is zero doubt in my mind that I would have been on fire with no source of accelerant immediately. I couldn't imagine it. And I hope that I never have to experience something that dark. That was a dark timeline for UVA fans. And to top it all off, they already can't beat us. I mean, 17 out of 18, whatever it's up to now. But to lose to our interim head coach in such a soul-sucking manner.
You lose to the interim head coach, J.C. Price, by the way, who, I mean, just venom spews out of his body with hatred for UVA.
Love it. Love it.
He lights up a cigar on your field, while Virginia Tech fans, who it looked like were there in the masses, it looked like they were the primary fan in attendance.
Well, we need to talk about that.
You could hear "Let's Go Hokies" chant.
UVA, really? The attendance at that game? Did that not blow you away?
I mean, I wasn't surprised.
No, with the football culture at that school has always been poor, but it's not been that poor to where Scott Stadium is that empty for a rivalry game.
It felt like it was mostly Tech fans there.
It was.
Yeah, I'm not just saying that, but it felt that way watching the game, seeing the colors in the stands, and then you allow another team to rush your field. And I mean, you could talk about rushing the field and, you know, you're 6-6, they're 6-6. Like it was just like, again, just adding to the darkness of the day for UVA fans. Like, if that didn't set you off to bust your TV up, maybe you just don't care that much. I don't know. But
how do you think rush the field police take it when an away team rushes the field?
Oh,
I think it depends on.
You're rushing the field against a 9-3 team. Act like you've been there before, buddy.
I can't stand those guys. They come out of the woodwork when anyone rushes the field. Savannah State could beat the New York Giants, and there would be somebody on Twitter saying, "Oh well, rushing the field.
That's dangerous. Somebody could get hurt.
Get out of here, man! Like let people enjoy things. Let people have fun.
Rushing the field, you've got multiple offensive linemen planting the flag there multiple times, taking videos. You've got people changing the name of Scott Stadium on Google Maps to Lane Stadium North. I mean, what a horrific week to be a UVA football fan for those of you that do exist.
Can we talk about another thing real quick? Shout out to the flags. You got to make better flags for these guys to plant. I've seen about 4 different guys try to plant a flag at midfield in college football for the past 2 weeks.
It's not real ground. It
doesn't matter. We got to figure out how to plant it. I want to see that thing. I want to see that Virginia Tech flag triumphantly blowing in the breeze, standing with no one else's support in the middle of that field. That's all I want. Yeah. If you're an inventor, invent me a flagpole for these cheerleaders that can penetrate college football stadiums, which according to our ground expert here is not real ground.
Well, it's not. It's not like your backyard.
Well, you just said it's not real ground. So, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, it's like artificial turf.
Not at Scott Stadium. Not at Scott Stadium. That's real turf.
Yeah, but it's still like, I don't know. I know what you mean. The thing's not going into the ground.
That's what I mean. It definitely doesn't behave like real.
But at the same time, it's probably better if it doesn't have a sharp point on it. Just
safety
people around.
I wouldn't trust Brock Hoffman with a sharp pointed flag.
It probably is like our backyard. Actually, at Scott Field. I don't know. But yeah. So Tech, I mean, big day on the ground, 320 yards rushing. Blackshear won his ACC Player of the Week for the second time in 3 weeks. The week he didn't win, he had 2 carries, played the entire game. Last week, career high, 169 yards rushing. So interesting. But yeah, I mean, good for the Hokies to get back in the win column. I think when you look at the ACC Coastal this year, it was not really coastal chaos. Pitt kind of led the entire way. You had Miami start to kind of gain their footing once Van Dyke got in and got some games under his belt, but I think they finished 6-6. You had maybe they were better than that, maybe a 7-5. You had UVA finish 6-6. You had North Carolina finish 6-6, which was the biggest disappointment out of anybody. And then you had Virginia Tech finish 6-6. So not a lot of great football being played, but if you're UVA now, and we'll talk about the Bronco announcements. So it sounds like Bronco decided to resign. Doesn't sound like he was forced out. We're not going to speculate on the quotes. He had some really bizarre quotes.
He did.
Yeah. So, I'll let you kind of come to your own conclusions there, but he's going to finish the bowl game, and then he is on his way out. So Virginia's going to have a new head coach. Be interested to see. I'll throw an early name at you. Gary Patterson could be an interesting fit.
That seems like a move UVA would make.
Yeah, could be an interesting fit. I don't know if it's a good fit, but it would be an interesting fit. Just an early name I'm throwing out, but either way, like look at UVA's
Charles Huff. That would be a good hire for them. And I wouldn't want to go up against that guy in recruiting, but Charles Huff would be a good one. I think Gary Patterson is a weird, like you could see UVA making that move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I think UVA's roster is not in super great shape, if I'm being honest. Like, we don't know what Armstrong's going to do, if he's going to transfer or maybe he could go pro. I don't know. But defensively, they're a train wreck. They don't have a rushing game. Their offensive line wasn't great.
Anthony Poindexter would be a good hire. Anthony Poindexter.
Yeah, that name crossed my mind. He's been rumored to be up for the defensive position with the Virginia Tech staff, which I don't think will happen. But
no.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But surprise surprise announcement today. I mean, honestly, like, and again, I'm not saying this to be, polarizing, but you can go 6-6 and 7-5 all day at UVA and keep your job forever. And I mean, that's where Bronco was headed, with maybe like an 8-4 season thrown in here and there.
For sure.
But honestly, like at this point, they should probably go ahead and build a statue of Bryce Perkins, because I'm not sure they're ever going to be Virginia Tech in football again. That I did want to throw in there to be polarizing. So
I'm going to knock on wood real quick, because that's feeling like you're putting a big old jinx into the universe there.
But yeah, so we'll see what happens. Maybe David Cutcliffe, who knows? But
oh no, that guy does not have an ounce of head coaching left in his body.
That was a joke.
Okay, I was gonna say. I mean, he would be a husk of a man up there. He has given everything. I could see Cutcliffe not being able to get away from the game, maybe to go in like an advisory role, sort of like a Jerry Kill to another coach. I could see that from him, but I just think, man, he's worn out. Speaking of the Duke opening, though, I don't know if you've seen some of the rumors, but there was a rumor that I saw that Jeff Monken, Army's head coach, was a potential candidate there, and I will meet him at the border of North Carolina for a fight if he dares to bring the triple option back in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I'm not letting that happen. Not again. Not again. Those were dark days, Paul.
That's probably a good fit at Duke, though.
It is, because, I mean, you get the most out of your talent with a system like that. You can't recruit very well. Your fourth best football program in your state at best. Jeff Monken would make a lot of sense, but I'm not going to let it happen. So
yeah, it would add to coastal chaos for sure. I would hate to see the triple option back in the ACC.
Me too.
God, I hated.
Please
that.
no.
I did.
Please no.
It was so frustrating. Just not football I'd like to watch, but yeah, that's kind of the recap for today. Real quick, Tim, what's your prediction for the ACC championship game?
It's a good question. Wake Forest, to me, Hartman just hasn't looked especially sharp the past few weeks. And I don't know if you've been watching. He's getting a lot of passes batted down. I think people are starting to kind of figure out how to best deal with that long mesh offense that Wake Forest has. And really the key to beating Hartman is keeping him in the pocket. I haven't been thrilled with some of the throws he's made. I think he's been really inaccurate lately. I think a lot of his success comes as a product of that offense, which is a great system that Clawson runs. I think I'm going to go Pitt, man. I think Narduzzi's going to get it done. I don't see Wake with that defense, especially against Kenny Pickett.
Their defense is weird, though. I mean, it'll look awful,
and then it'll bow
up.
Then
they hold UVA to 17 points.
Right.
I think Dracovic was 3 of 11 passing last week, and they beat them 42-10.
Dracovic looked awful. We got to have a discussion at another point about Dracovic and how bad that injury messed up his ability to play the quarterback position.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I just don't think he's ready. I mean, it was weird because he had the one pop game against Georgia Tech, but they have been awful to finish the season.
Yeah. But it's just throws that would be easy for Dracovic to make were just wildly off the mark in the way that
he's clearly not himself.
No.
But I mean, I'm going Pitt too. I think what we're seeing with Wake is the level of competition has been better in November.
Yeah,
they had a pretty run-of-the-mill schedule there for a while, and I mean, they took advantage of it, and they're still a good offense. Don't like their defense. But like I said, their defense can step up and make plays at times. It's just it can also allow 20 points in 2 minutes, so it is what it is.
I think they're opportunistic. I think they can get turnovers when they need to. That keeps them in a lot of games defensively. But I do think more than anything, I think the Wake Forest offense is going to – something has happened on tape that I think they've picked up on, because Sam Hartman has had such a different time with the quarterback in play lately, especially when it comes to getting passes past the defensive line without getting tipped. He's been uncomfortable. He's looked inaccurate. It's just not the same Sam Hartman we were seeing 5 to 6 weeks ago. I'm feeling comfortable with the Pitt pick there. And shout out to, obviously, when we're talking about last week's action, that NC State UNC game was something else. I don't know that I
Yeah.
can recall a game as drunk as that game was.
Yeah, that game was drunk.
Completely drunk. And it just it delighted me so much, as you know, grew up an NC State fan. The only time I'm going to miss an NC State game is when the Hokies are playing. But to see this season happen to Mac Brown was just one of the most heartwarming turns of events that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And for it to be capped by that display of ineptitude towards the end of the game.
UNC didn't win a game on the road this year.
No.
Like, that's awful.
Mm-hmm.
That's awful.
If you go back and look at the tape, there's a lot of issues on that UNC team that I don't think have come to a head yet, but there's a lot of players in that UNC secondary that don't like tackling and don't like giving max effort. And that was strange to see.
The UNC secondary, I think, was probably the most disappointing part of their defense this year.
Yeah.
It just didn't look very good. So
too talented to look that bad.
They've had a few transfers as well. If I had to put money on it, I'd say Sam Hill's probably going to go pro. So it'll be interesting to see what UNC looks like next year.
Sam Howell's an interesting case. I'm not so sure how friendly Longo's offense has been to him. He's almost regressed every year since his first year. I don't know if statistically that shows up, but
I bet it would this year.
There is a lot of separation that used to occur with those wide receivers that dried up outside of downs this year. That really, I think it made the game a lot less easy for Howell this year, and it made him more uncomfortable. And I don't know if that's Longo's offense. I mean, Longo's been the offensive coordinator the whole time. I don't know what's going on, but man, I'm not a fan of Longo's game plans. And when you see how much that offense has changed from prime Sam Howell years as a freshman, it's just not the same. It's not the same Sam Howell. And I don't know what he's going to do, but if I were him, I wouldn't risk another year in that offense.
I think there's probably going to be some changes to the coordinators there at UNC. Maybe not on offense, but defense. I think Jay Baben's probably out, but
he's got to be.
So that's our show for today. Tim, any final words?
Yeah. Is Army Navy this week or next week? Do you know?
I think it's next week. I think it's after the championships.
Make sure you watch that. Army Navy, best football game every year. Championships this weekend. Get your fill. Enjoy college football because it's fleeting. We're at the point of the season now where I get sad because we are close towards the end of the season. However, bowl season is the best season, and it's almost here. So hang with us. We'll go over a bunch of
we're
bowl
bowling
games
this year. So that's good.
Pinstripe Bowl, baby. I would love to go to that bowl game. I'd love to see a football game in Yankee Stadium because I sure as hell am not going to watch the Yankees play.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to old Yankee Stadium. I haven't been to their new one, but it's a good show. Appreciate you listening. If you don't mind, leave us a review, 5 stars, 4 stars, preferably. If you prefer to get your podcasts on YouTube, we're on YouTube now. This is coming to you via video. You can see our beautiful smiling faces. And how hysterical we are when we were talking about that UVA third down play. But that's our show. Thanks for listening. Welcome Brent Pry to the Virginia Tech family, and go Hokies. Let's take it back, Virginia.
Hey, let's get it.